Hello and welcome back to another video, and if you're new to the channel, I am happy that you could join us. In today's video, we will be talking a little bit about planning for your project, or PFYP as I nor anyone else actually call it. We will touch on some common mistakes, some must-dos and some must-don't. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure what we'll talk about yet as I've just started writing the script for the video, so let us just get started and see where this road takes us. The very first thing I want to talk about though is something that probably will encompass some of what we'll talk about later in the video, and that is having a clear goal for your project. Having a clear goal for your project is important as it can prevent the need for time-consuming and maybe costly changes later on. Many people make the mistake of not planning, thinking they can just figure things out as they go. However, this can lead to many problems down the road. To avoid this, take some time to sit down and think about your project's overall vision, as well as the key mechanics that will set it apart from others. Once you have a rough idea of what you want to achieve, make a list of the requirements for each mechanic and consider how they might interact with each other in the future. This will help you build a solid foundation for your project and avoid having to make major changes later on. You also have to consider your target audience, basically just figuring out who is going to play my game, and then design it to appeal to that group of people. For example, a game aimed at children will have different graphics, gameplay and difficulty level compared to games aimed at adults. Figure out who's going to play your game and tailor the experience to them. Creating a detailed game design document that outlines the game's mechanics, story and other elements is worth taking the time to do. Sit down, put it on paper, in Word, on a whiteboard or a fucking papyrus scroll. I don't know, just do it because spending a little time here can and probably will save you a lot of time in the future. When planning, for the love of God, understand this, you are not making the next AAA game. Start small. Starting a new project always comes with high ambitions, probably extreme ambitions like I am going to become a millionaire. Or World of Warcraft now, haha, mine is better. If you say you don't think that way, you are a fucking liar and I do not like you, feel free to unsubscribe. We all have these thoughts, but they are not realistic. Lower your ambitions a tad and work step by step, getting better each time. Also, try to step back and think logically. Why would anyone want to play your FPS game, or your zombie survival, or your battle royale? There's already games out there that does these exact things, most likely down to the point that the only thing that differs your project from theirs is the guns used and the maps. Valorant, for example, brought a completely different art style compared to CSGO, and at the same time introduced spells and abilities. That set it apart from CSGO enough to pull in a new audience. If you're making an FPS like CSGO and it's exactly the same, why would anyone want to play your game when there is a better option? Set yourself apart, find a twist to something already existing, or do the horrible task of actually, inventing something new. Good luck. Once you have an outline of what you're going to be creating, you can move on to the next step, starting work on the core mechanics. Here, I would suggest that you build everything separately from your main project. This is mainly to avoid both corrupting and adding things to your main one that you are not 100% sure will stay there. What I mean by this is that sometimes you can start building something and midway through figure out a better way to do it. At that point, there might be things that you no longer need in the remake, and that will just be wasteful to have in the project or wasteful of your time trying to clean up. Might only be 30 seconds here and a minute there, but it can quickly add up, especially if you're building something that can completely bork your project. TLDR, build your mechanics separately, then migrate over to main. And this brings us to the next point where I also invalidate some of what I just said by introducing version control and branches. Version control is a system that tracks changes to files over time. It both allows multiple people to work on the same project at the same time and tracks every change so that mistakes can be rolled back. A popular version control system is Git. Git allows developers to create a repository for a project, which acts as the central location where all of the files are stored. Developers can then clone this repository to their own computers, making the changes they want, then commit those back to the central repository. Git also allows us to create branches of the main repository. This allows you or the people working with you to grab a copy of the project that can be modified independently of the main branch. This allows you to work on new features without affecting the main branch, and is a way you can omit from having separate projects and merging in. If you do set up Git, you will not regret it. Another thing worth mentioning is that you do need to read up on Git LFS if you want to be able to push your Unreal project without any problems. Out of the box, you will not be able to push files above a certain size. Git LFS fixes this problem. A little side note, if you want to avoid paying for hosting, Microsoft Azure should still be free. If it is, I'm leaving this dialogue in and adding the link down below, as well as links to everything else. Now that you have an outline of your project and begun work on your mechanics, you might find yourself wanting to, deviate a fuck ton away from your original vision. Do not be afraid to pivot to a new direction. If you come to a point in your project where you find yourself being drawn towards something different than what you've been working on so far, make a backup or branch out of your main and begin to work on that. Don't be stuck in the idea that this is a action MMORPG story-driven car simulator FPS when what you've been working on feels more like an anime romance card game. Keep in mind, when you are branching out or creating a backup, you're essentially leaving a copy behind that you can easily roll back to. Don't be afraid to pivot and see what happens. Another thing I see happen way too often is people not treating it like a job. Remember, people get paid handsomely for the work you are currently doing. People are being headhunted if they are extremely good at coding, and who knows, maybe blueprint headhunters will exist in the future too, or maybe they already do, I don't know. What I mean though is, if you want your game to be worth $1 million, aka you being worth $1 million and driving a Bugatti, you gotta treat this shit like a job and not a hobby. That means setting up a work schedule, a proper 9 to 5 and sticking to it. The brain will eventually begin to associate the schedule as times where you should focus on development, and you will probably become more efficient at the same time. Granted, I'm not going to Google studies for this, so I might be bullshitting you all completely, but it does make sense, no? And while I do preach keeping a schedule, if you're anything like me or tens of thousands of others, you will find yourself having days that are not 9 to 5, but more of a caffeine booster sesh where you sit for 16 to 36 hours. And that is okay too. If you're on a roll, fucking go for it. But if you're slowly just chugging along, not feeling inspired, stick to the 9 to 5 and do your binges when you are. Speaking of keeping a schedule and treating it like a job, we got to talk about teamwork. Now, in some cases, a team of one can succeed quite well. Just look at Stardew Valley and Minecraft. Of course, I'm not saying that the current state of Minecraft was made by one person, but the base of the game was. So there's definitely possibilities to creating something solo. However, if you do have a team, you need to practice good communication skills and teamwork. Always try to keep your team members in the loop, treat them fairly and with respect. Having weekly or even daily catch-up meetings to discuss what's on the agenda for the day is critical when working as a team. Thank you so much for watching the video and taking the time out of your day to listen to me jabber a bit about planning and development. I hope you found this information valuable and that it will help you in your future projects. Remember the key takeaways from what we discussed. Good practices and common sense should be the foundation of your planning process. I truly encourage you to put what we talked about into practice and let me know how it works for you. Keep learning and growing. Until next time, I'll see you later.